All right, so I'm going to talk about analytics. So quick show of hands. How many of you saw Alex's keynote yesterday and me do a sneak cameo in Alex's keynote yesterday? Okay, most of the room. All right, so I'm going to do a little bit more than what we showed yesterday. So yesterday we showed a couple of screens. I'm going to show all of the screens that are available so you can get a better idea overall how this all comes together. So for Lumen, 4 key themes. One of them is analytics. So Tom Davenport talked yesterday. He's been writing books about analytics for almost a decade now. So analytics has been around for a while, but it's very important now within this setting because you have all of the data across your entire platform to be able to understand what's happening across the entire automation. So why analytics with SPA? One platform, all of your bot data, all of your AI data, all of your process data, your OCR data, your manual data, all on a single platform. So a lot of data sitting there that's available, pulled together, available within one space. Now this gives you process insights, being able to track transactions, track cycle times, things that people tend to struggle with today with any automation platform because they aren't able to get to that level of detail. So being able to understand the data, understand your process to that degree. Then using that to have some standard visuals that work across the platform, and also have process-specific tailored visuals for this as well. So using modern technology, other capabilities, being able to do alerts, and getting into the predictive side of things to be able to automatically allocate more bots, automatically pull in more people, and be a little bit more prescriptive around automation rates. So that's my final slide. I'm going to switch to the software and just start talking through this a little bit more. So I'll flash the process up again. I had talked to this a little bit yesterday. So in a process like trade finance that we had talked about yesterday, where you have a lot of complex documentation that needs to be understood understood for a process where it's facilitating global trade or doing anti-money laundering or different types of use cases. Now in a process like this one, you have different steps. Each of these steps is one task performed within that process, and within each of these tasks, different ways to solve it. So the blue boxes here, a couple of them in the upper left, a couple other spots within the process. These are situations where you're applying RPA, opening up user interfaces with robots to be able to source data, taking fields and compare them from different sources, so you have a way to consolidate and understand how this comes together. So those RPA pieces tend to be a part of your overall process that needs to be executed. So when you get into that next box there, the third box, the gray one, something like OCR, we need to convert the images to text. Not every document is a clean, easy thing to work with, so you need to convert it to a format that you can work with. Some type of textual representation so you can apply different automation. So having OCR within your process. Then using different techniques, machine learning in particular, but different types of machine learning, to be able to take that unstructured data and convert it into something structured. So this is where AI starts coming into to play, machine learning to take convert the unstructured to structured. So all of this is wrapped together in one process. The white boxes are also pulling in people. So not only do you have your machines, you only have your bots, you also have your people wrapped into this. So having all of that data, all of that capacity in one platform, you can now understand what's happening within your process at a deeper level than before. So analytics start looking something like this. Let me expand the time range here so you get a little more view as to what's happening. So if I expand this to 3 weeks, you can see across all processes across the platform how this is starting to perform, how this is playing out. So if I open the filter here, you can see it's not just trade finance or not just the process I was talking about. Everything might be loaded in. Here's a series of banking processes as well as some insurance processes and retail. Most likely in your organization, you only have one of those 3 industries. But having the ability to filter and look across the organization as well as into specific processes. Now, what are you showing? What's really interesting here? So volumes are, of course, important. Making sure there's a heartbeat of data moving through, getting impact of what's happening. If there's unnecessary spikes, unnecessary dips, maybe areas you might want to investigate. So here, Weekends, things tend to slow down, less data's coming in, other people aren't working, so nothing's happening. But your volume might not go down to zero. You might still have your bots executing and finishing work. You might have work finishing up from the previous week. You might have stuff that's able to be completed. But you can still track and make sure things are moving through somewhat consistently throughout week to week, day to day, month to month. Now, on these other charts on the right, we get into SLAs. So because you're able to now track each individual transaction, you can figure out, did that transaction execute in such a way that it was how you wanted? Are you having a lot of violations? Are you having issues as things are moving through? So the orange dots there at the top, this one you can see it doesn't have as many, but there are some scenarios here where SLAs are being breached. On the right-hand side of that, you can see which processes are targeting that. So I'm going to focus on trade finance here. So if I hover over that, trade finance is conveniently the one on the top that has the most SLA violations. So we'll dig into that one. But you can see you're tracking that across your processes to help you figure out where to investigate. Now down below as well, more metrics. So bot utilization. Do I have enough bots? A question in the RPA space that often comes up. This is where you can track. Are you overusing your bots, or is that not the problem? Is it not a bot thing? Is it something else? Being able to have different technologies available, you can answer that right away with the screen here. And we'll show an extra level of depth there in one of the other charts. Final one on the right-hand side, automation. Sometimes issues do come up. Those issues can be tracked and captured, so you can figure out which processes might need more investigation, which scenarios are coming through where you might have errors, which bugs have been identified that you hadn't previously seen. So being able to track that and understand that and figure out where to dive into next. So I'm going to filter this and go to that trade finance example. You'll see the chart will change a little bit. I'll just narrow the time frame down to just this week. So if I start seeing that maybe I might have an issue here, I filter it down to this week. Cuts my data a little bit, and now I can see Monday I had a spike, captured a lot of stuff from this weekend. As we've moved down the week, less and less volume, less is coming in. But I can really start seeing that my SLAs are starting to have an issue. In the middle of the week, SLAs came about. I don't have an issue with my bots, but I do have some issues on the right-hand side as well. So I want to investigate a little bit further, dive into the other tabs, and figure out where I could make some changes or where maybe changes have happened to see that the SLA actually corrected itself. So I click on the process chart. So of these 6 tabs, the process chart's the only one that's designed to be tailored to a specific process or have specific visualizations. The reason for that is by having something that that functions across all processes, the other 5 tabs, you have a lot of insights by just opening up the software and getting access to it. But here, each process is a little bit different. What's particular to that process owner, what's particular to the data itself. So here it's expected to have some tailoring. Now, most of the times you're going to want to do things like cycle times that we have here. Cycle times here based on time. Here it's saying everything under 120 minutes is within the SLA. Everything that's above would have breached the SLA. So just checking on the cycle times. Every process might have a slight different way that they do it. Maybe it's not all documents that are coming in are treated equal. Maybe different segments, different types of inputs have different cycle times as well. So different ways to track that. So what else am I seeing here beyond cycle time? Am I breaching my SLA or not? Here I can see things like volumes. I can see the issues, but now not at a process level, but now at an individual task level. And then I can get into transaction costs. How much does it cost for me to execute each individual transaction? Now, you have access to people, and people are going to be one of the more expensive drivers of your automation, but you also have time on bots. You have time on infrastructure. So because you have access to all of the infrastructure as well, understanding how that's utilized, how that plays into your overall cost of ownership for each process. This one here, we're going to investigate the blip here in the data. If you saw from yesterday, we'll get into machine learning and how that was able to self-correct itself moving forward. But we can also get into the costs and see that in this example, the data from Canada is coming in more expensive than Germany. The UK data at the bottom there is the least expensive to process. Could be because it's just slimmer documentation. Could be because they have less complexity in the data. As the process owner, you might understand that and be checking that. You might expect that to stay the same over time, or maybe you could realize that Canada is usually the cheapest, and now it's become the most expensive. What's happening there? Where might I want to investigate? Okay, so let's continue with the investigation here. So I'm going to click on the speed tab. So how fast are things moving through? Is every task created equal? The answer is no. Different types of automation might execute in different ways. One bot task might be a lot slower or faster than the other bot task just because of the logic that you want it to perform. So each of these charts, the next 3 tabs, are designed to have an overview at the top, and then as you scroll down the page, get more and more information. So here, this starts with cycle times for the process as a whole, and then as I move down, it breaks down the data into a task level when you get to the bottom to be able to understand how the data is moving through. So at the top, what I can see is that each transaction that came through, what's the cycle time that was being performed, or how long did it execute? Now this one, you can see a spread here. There's a lot of them that kind of spread out. Most of them are actually grouped here to the left-hand side. So what it's trying to show is what's our typical processing time frame, and then where do we have outliers that might have occurred within this. So if I see that there's some of these outliers, I could start investigating them, click into it, figure out what was part of that data set that caused the problem. But it's not just at the process. As we were talking about, we want to scroll down and get more information as well. So I go to the breakdown summary here. Here you can see bot, manual, machine learning, OCR, tower. Different ways to execute and perform within your automation. So from the process chart, we had different types of boxes, different types of technologies. Here you're seeing how those technologies are working at an aggregate level. Your RPA, your bots at the top, how fast is that type of work executing? Your machine learning, your manual, how fast are people executing? Your machine learning, your OCR, your control tower, anything that's processed centrally. In some cases, you can execute rules within a centralized resource. You don't have to send everything to the bots themselves. So being able to understand where are your slow spots. Here you'd be able to see that the bots are the ones where you have the outlier steps. So that's where you'd want to investigate and figure out why it's a little bit slower. People have a spread. Not every manual task is as easy as others. Some are really quick. Some are a little bit slower, so you're able to track that as well. Machine learning, OCR, maybe, well, OCR is never going to be 0. OCR always takes some time to convert images to text. But your width here of your difference across each task is probably going to be more around the size of the document, the amount of pages, which is a little bit different than the machine learning models where it's more based on the data that you're trying to analyze. So let's scroll down further. So the tasks is where this one starts to get more interesting, I think. So if I sort here, I'd be able to see which tasks have that range and that variability as well. So as I continue on, I keep getting more information. And you can see that the ones that have the rangiest volume here, rangiest cycle time, are these 4 tasks here at the top. Logging into applications, retrieving and analyzing emails, entering data into the trade application, trade finance data, and then downloading some of the documents. So in some of those cases, there were issues that were causing it to take a little bit more time. Maybe the system was down for a while and it had to retry a little bit. Maybe it just had extra executions, had some pop-up windows that it had to work through that it wasn't getting in the other cases. So just trying to understand where this logic may lie, you don't have to say, oh, the whole process is going slow, something really big must be wrong. Maybe it's just really focused on a particular piece. And then as I go down to the bottom, I get to the table. This is where it probably becomes a little bit more useful, a little bit easier to work with from just from a numbers standpoint. So if I want to understand what are my rangiest types of tasks, I could sort this on standard deviation. See the ones that are sometimes slow, sometimes fast, and just get an understanding of where else to investigate. Final one here, I'll click on issues. I probably don't have issues in every step along the way. Some of them probably have a couple. The rest, one of them probably has a lot, and then the rest probably have no issues, which is what you see here. So I can quickly see where I would want to investigate, where I would want to make some enhancements to make sure that my automation is working correctly. So that's the speed tab. So next we're going to talk about is capacity. So speed is all about you have a task that needs to be performed. How long does it take to execute that task? Capacity gets a little bit more into infrastructure. So do I have enough infrastructure to support what I'm trying to do based on the volumes that I'm trying to work on this with? So again, at the top, a little bit of a summary. Here, this is transactions that are coming through at different points in the day. So this is basically every hour, how much data came through and was completed within that hour, and did it finish within an SLA. So you can see, obviously, there's a big white gaps in between. That's basically the overnight hours. You're not getting data every hour. There's some hours where you're just not getting data, overnight hours, what have you. So you're not seeing any bars there on purpose. Also, throughout the day, your volume is typically not consistent either. 9 a.m. you might get a lot. 10 a.m. you might not get much. Even though when you're going through requirements analyses and discussing your process, you might say, oh, we get 1,000 an hour. You probably don't get 1,000 every hour. You probably get 500 one hour, 1,500 the next hour, 200, whatever. Different variability. So that'll help understand your infrastructure as well, because sometimes you might need to plan for the worst case scenario, plan for having enough bots when your volume is at its peak, and they might not be as utilized as much throughout the rest of the day. So you might be able to understand you need to schedule or work around the different infrastructure that you have. So as I scroll down, again, more information as we move down the page. So I won't go too far yet. So here, again, we have our different breakdowns by bots, manual, machine learning, and OCR. Here, again, you have your hourly breakdown of how it came through and how it was utilized for each type of work. So for your bots, you have how many transactions you had to do, as well as how many units were used to do that. So in the bots case, a unit is individual screens that you have access to. VDIs, high-density bots on a server, basically every screen that you're using to automate from a bot perspective. Manual, the unit would be people. How many people do you have executing? What's the utilization of those folks that are working as part of your process? The others, as you go down to machine learning, OCR, there you're talking about the servers. So there you're using, for OCR, it's how many pages can you basically do per minute, per second. That's going to be based on how many processors you have and how many CPUs you have. So it can get relatively technical as we get into the capacity side, but just to keep it at a high level here, it's basically understanding what level of capacity do you have depending on the type of work that you're breaking it down with. Different types for different types of infrastructure. So at the bottom, then we start getting into a little bit of some matrix code here on the screen is kind of what it looks like, but it's actually pretty useful. So what it's telling you is when you had to do some work, how long was it doing and what resource was doing it. So at the top, we have the 14 bots that this process worked with. And when this process needed to use a bot, when was it using it? When was it starting to collect that data? So it wasn't always doing RPA. It wasn't consistently sending work to the bots. It was sending a little bit of work. The bot was completing it, sending it back, and freeing up and going elsewhere. You can see that it was sharing work across different processes. So I'll filter in a second and show what it looks like with all processes. But we have, I think, 19 bots on this particular setup, and there's only 14 that were used for this process. So it didn't even need all of the bots to be able to execute the work. It was sharing them with the other processes. You've also probably noticed the red bars here. The red bars indicate when the bots were offline. So as great as some of the bots are, sometimes they do go offline for different reasons and need to be brought back up. So the red bars indicate areas where it tried to do some work on that bot, couldn't, went to another one because that one was unavailable. People, as you scroll down, so the bots kind of do the RPA work. People are doing, obviously, the manual work. Here you have each particular person, how they worked throughout the day, how much work they were performing, and how they were being utilized for this process. So some of these people are probably actively engaged, the SMEs that have been doing this process for a while. The ones that are working less might be their managers. There might be someone that's shared across different processes, maybe someone that's filling in temporarily throughout the day. So you can kind of track and see how these people are leveraged across this process. And that your units as you go down for machine learning, OCR, Tower, other ways to understand how those are utilized as well. Let me filter this, or remove the filter on this, and just show you what it looks like from a bot perspective there at the bottom. So here, now I can see all of my bots, how they're being leveraged across all of my processes. So with WorkFusion SPA, you're not just limited to a bot per process. The intent is you're sharing these bots as much as possible, sending work to the bots when you need to, letting it finish, and then freeing it up for other processes to come in. So here you can see a better view of how these 19 bots were utilized, how most of them are actually almost fully allocated throughout the day, which is probably a good thing, as long as you're not missing SLAs because you don't have enough bots. But as you can see at the bottom, this 19th bot, the 19th bot here on the bottom doesn't get used very much. So maybe you don't need that bot. Maybe you can cut that back. WorkFusion SPA doesn't typically sell on a per bot license, so you could see, maybe I can do this with fewer bots. Or maybe I don't need more bots when I expand to other processes because I have enough infrastructure in place. Different planning that you can do. I'll come back to that point in a moment. So let me filter back to trade finance, show the machine learning one real quick. All right, so AutoML, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, where there's a dip that you're seeing in your impact from the automation, dip because you have a lot more manual work that was being occurred, so you're getting less impact from this work. So as I scroll down the page, I can start investigating where that might be the case. At the top here, or in this second chart here, understanding how you're calculating that dip in the process. Sorry, these two are tied, so let me just show them at the same time. So the table here basically explains what's in the chart. Chart's a little bit more visual, easier to look at, easier to work with, but then you have sometimes you just need the data. So what's your baseline if you don't have any machine learning doing anything? How much manual effort would that require? Then now that you have machine learning available, how much manual effort is that removing? Tracking both of those, that's the percentage up at the top. So you basically have the calculation available for you down below, and then getting into the STP rates that's part of this as well. Some of the data going through machine learning never touches a person. Maybe it goes to AutoQC, but doesn't touch a person. You're tracking that at a task level for this process. So this one has three different machine learning models that you saw on the previous screen with the process chart with the three green boxes. So these are three different models that you're seeing here for your machine learning. And we showed this a little bit yesterday. Let me explain it a little bit more now. The top two bars are showing overall, how is my data coming through? So you have really four scenarios that are part of this. Data's coming through. When the machine predicts a value, it will also predict a level of confidence with that as well. So in some cases, the confidence is very, very low, and it just knows, some cases it's not even able to make a prediction. Just something it hadn't seen before, didn't know what to do. That's the not learned category, the one on the furthest left. In some cases, it'll make a prediction, but it knows it's probably not a good prediction. It could create something, it had some idea, but also probably needs more data, probably needs some other additional groupings with it to understand what that was. So this is the low confidence bubble there. Then the third one is it made a mistake. So how do you know it made a mistake? It's because with your AutoQC process or part of your manual review process, you identified that there was an issue, corrected it, and you got clean data in the end. But this is a scenario where where the learning could get better, and it does automatically as it's capturing more data. And then the final dark gray line is, of course, where it got it correct. So in most cases, that's correct here in the process. Now the mountain here of data, this is where my volume sits across those confidence levels as it's coming through. So I can do a little bit of planning here to understand if I adjust my confidence threshold, how will that impact the manual work that's tied to this? So if I take this slider and I cut the confidence score so it's sending some of this low confidence work to people, right now you can see that everything's 100% automated, that second bar down below. As I slide that over, it's going to get a little bit more orange. And that's because I've taken some of that volume and I've said, well, this lower confident data, don't take the prediction, send it to a person because I don't trust those predictions that are a little bit lower, which is fine. You have people that are there to help and assist in these situations, make the machine better. So take that lower confidence data, send it to people, let them fix it, let them resolve it, and let them retrain the machine so that those situations become fewer and fewer over time. It's able to get smarter as it goes along. So not only do you have this at the high level, but then you also have it at the individual field level. So getting into finding why am I getting that manual, why am I having some issues with my manual work? Maybe because it's not understanding the amounts, not understanding the currencies. Some fields are okay, other fields, maybe there's some issues that you need to understand. Just newer data that's coming through, additional validations you could add, different ways to think through that. So I'll finish with the manual tab here. or wait, 2. This will be the next to last one. Last tab, I need to go back to another one real quick. So manual work that's part of your process. Is my manual work executing correctly? I'm using people, but am I effectively using them? So here we have the 3 manual tasks that were part of this. You can see in the upper left-hand one, you can see how many people were involved and how long did they take on average. So of these 3 tasks, kind of how those come together. This one had fewer people and was one of the faster ones. This one actually had the most people and was the fastest. So I can investigate and see who are the people that were tied to that task. That filters the chart on the right-hand side where I can start looking at individual people. How do they compare against their peers? The y-axis is how fast were they. The x-axis is how many tasks did they do. So the people that did the most tasks here were also the quickest at doing it. So maybe they have a lot of best practices. They're able to get through their work. Maybe they just wanted to get through their work and didn't care about the best practices. They were just moving through really, really quickly. That you can start understanding. You can get into, as you scroll down the page, you can get into who that person was, what their cycle times were, and understand if you probably have a personal relationship with them, understand probably, is this the type of person that rushes through work, or is this the type of person that is very diligent? Things you can understand. Maybe you want to capture up the best practices that they're performing, or maybe you want to retrain them and make sure that they aren't rushing through the next time around. Same thing with the slow person up at the top here. Maybe they're going a little too slow, or maybe they're going the right pace and everyone else should be doing the work like them. So different ways to think about it, but as you move through, you at least have the data to start making these decisions and start understanding how it's going to come together. So I'll finish with going back to another chart here, but getting a little bit more, even more into the predictive side. So I click on process. And at the bottom here, we have a couple of predictive charts that help you understand how many bots do I need, how many people do I need for this process. So if you're planning out your bot infrastructure, some places you have to do math equations to figure out how many bots am I going to need. Here we're trying to do that automatically for you. So for the volume level that you have, how many bots do you have now, and how many bots you're going to need if this volume changes. So right now, I'm using 14 bots for this trade finance process. So at this level, if I wanted to reduce the amount of bots, I could probably get a similar level of output with only about 6 or 7 bots. So if I wanted to focus my infrastructure and adjust this down a little bit, I could cut the bots down to that level. But I have other processes that are shared here. I might have more volume coming to my process, so I might not want to do that right away. But you at least have more information to be able to make that assessment captured within the software to be able to pull this all together. Same thing with people on the right. You have the level of people, the number of FTEs that you're utilizing for this process and across the application, being able to understand what those volumes are and how they all come together. Okay, so that's the deep dive, that's the overview. That's analytics within the software. So I'll just go back to that slide that we had shown. So the key theme here is not only do you have the data, but you have data across your entire automation. One platform, all of the data that you have. You have your process insights with this. You can get into alerting, predictive actions, prescriptive automation rates, really understanding how your process is operating today, as well as where it's going to be in the future. All right. So with that, I think bring Adam up, and he'll probably let you go to lunch. Okay.
Thanks so much, Kyle. That was awesome.
All right.
So our R&D team has been working on this analytics for about a year, and our engineering team has probably been working on this for about 8 months. And you saw basically all of it in the space of 30 minutes.